I'm drinking the Puka Love tea, and I'm wearing my little love heart cardigan because today I'm going to tell you about my favorite books of 2023. The books that I absolutely loved, will not stop talking about. And of course, I've got to put them in order so that we can determine what is my favorite book of 2023. Every month I post wrap-ups of my reading from that month. So if you want to know more about any of these books and what I thought about them after I first read them, you can go back and find them in my monthly wrap-ups. Starting at number 10, we have Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan. Now, Julia Whelan has narrated some of my favorite audiobooks, and she wrote a rom-com about an audiobook narrator. She made very clear to say that it was not autobiographical, and I think the character sounds very different from Julia herself. It was such an interesting and nuanced book. There were so many different threads that came together really seamlessly. I don't think it was the swooniest love interest, but it did feel very real, and you really understood why the main character was so into this person. It also is just really funny. At number 9, we have A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, and this is the first of the monk and robot duology. I've requested the second one from the library, and it's about a tea monk named Dex who, when trying to explore the world a little bit more, encounters the first robot anyone has seen for, I think, thousands of years, maybe hundreds, because back in the society's history, the robots gained sentience and just walked off into the wilderness and said, we'll leave you alone, you leave us alone, we'll check back in a few hundred years. And Dex encounters the robot that is checking in. This book is very cozy, it's very funny. I wish it was longer. It is a novella. It definitely could have been a novel, and I wish it were. I love Becky Chambers' writing. I'm reading A Close and Common Orbit right now, and her writing is so good, and I think she brings such humanity to every single interaction, and it creates such empathy where other science fiction that I've read creates distance and otherness, and this book really explores that very intentionally as well, thematically. At number 8, we have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, and this is a fantasy. It's hard to place this one into a genre, and it's hard to discuss why that is without spoiling anything, but we're gonna say it probably most closely resembles a fantasy, and it's about a man who lives in this giant house, and by giant I mean like the size of the world, that's like 3 stories, and the bottom story is filled with water, the top story is filled with clouds, and the middle story where he mostly lives is filled with just thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of statues. And he has no memory of how he got there. He has no memory of anything. He's just journaling his observations about each day. And it sounds weird and like maybe even kind of boring, but it is fascinating. And I said this when I did my original review, but the way that Susanna Clarke balanced the character not knowing certain things, but the reader being able to infer those things was masterful. It is such a good book. Truly unlike anything I've read before and probably will ever read again. Very, very singular. And it's very entertaining. If you like fantasy, if you like literary, genre-bending kind of fiction, if you like really detailed character studies, this is a fascinating one to pick up. Please don't sleep on this book. At number 7, we have Happy Place by Emily Henry. And I've reflected a lot on what I think about Happy Place, because there was obviously a lot of hype for it. I am an Emily Henry fan through and through. Beach Read is one of my favorite books of all time. And I actually debated putting Beach Read on this list because I did reread it this year, but that felt like a bit of a cop-out. I really enjoyed Happy Place, which is about 2 exes who are on a trip with some of their friends who don't know that they've broken up, and so they decide to pretend that they're still together so that they don't ruin one of their weddings. I have seen a lot of criticism of this book since it came out. A lot of the criticism is around their motivations for things not being strong enough. I don't think I agree with that. I think it made sense to me. It resonated for me. The pacing of this book, at first I thought it was a little bit too long, but actually I really loved the time and attention that was taken in resolving the conflict. I think that sometimes romances, and I'm probably guilty of this myself, can rush through conflict resolution, but when 2 people are deciding to spend their lives together, resolving that conflict in a meaningful way and in a way that feels resonant to a real life experience, I think adds richness to a story. And I love the way that Happy Place did that, maybe even better than any of her other books. I loved the setting, I loved the side characters, and I loved the way that everything resolved and came together. At number 6, we have The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren, and this is the sequel to The Soulmate Equation. Can be read as a standalone. That's what they say. I personally think you'll miss out on a lot if you haven't read The Soulmate Equation, but I loved this book. It's about a romance author, actually, named Fizzy, who is having extreme writer's block, but at the same time, a producer who usually does documentaries but has been tasked with doing a reality dating show. He decides to pitch it to Fizzy that she is the star of the show, and the dating contestants that they bring on are all like romance tropes. So they have the bad boy and the cowboy and the vampire and all of that. It is hilarious. It is very steamy. It is very swoon-worthy. If you've read The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane, I would say this is like a really good comp for that book. If you enjoyed that, you will enjoy this, and vice versa. Fizzy is funny and relatable and so easy to empathize with. This is a very melodramatic story. It is very out there in terms of the romance. It's not going to be like an Emily Henry book where it's really grounded in a plausible love story, but it is very swoon-worthy, and I think that's what Christina Lauren do best, is really swoon-worthy if a bit implausible stuff, and this is, I think, their best work to date. Next at number 5, we have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Very similar to The True Love Experiment, this is a sequel, can be read as a standalone, but I think you're missing out on a lot if you haven't read Part of Your World. Yours Truly is, I think, Abby Jimenez's best work to date. Maybe other than Life's Too Short. I love both of these books so much. She does what are called cinnamon roll boyfriends better than anybody. So these are men who are just the epitome of men written by women. They are emotionally intelligent. They also have plenty of agency and non-toxic masculinity, and they are sexy, and they are funny, and they are thoughtful. And the fact that all of that is possible while also going into a really nuanced exploration of this love interest's anxiety and his struggles with that is such a hard thing to balance, I can imagine, but done so well here. He is one of my favorite book boyfriends ever. I personally would say look up the content warnings for this book. I don't think that they're major ones, but the one that I'm thinking of, if it applies to you, you will be blindsided by it. So maybe just take a look. I don't think it's spoiling too much for anyone else. At number 4, we have You Again by Kate Goldbeck. And this was marketed as a retelling of When Harry Met Sally. Now, I have to admit that I have not watched When Harry Met Sally very many times. So I was going in like fairly fresh to reading this. I wasn't expecting any particular beats as a result. I think some people who are bigger fans of When Harry Met Sally and were expecting particular plot beats to be hit didn't get that. But I think that it's more about the relationship dynamic between these two and how they're both very like extreme personalities and they have a lot of growing to do. Frankly, the characters at the beginning of this book are super unlikable, both of them. I was really annoyed with both of them. And by the end of the book, I wanted nothing more than for these two people to be together. They had really realistic character growth arcs, but that also happened to be making them perfect for each other. And I think that is the ultimate in romance. It's hilarious. It is one of the funniest romances I've ever read in my life. I wouldn't say it's super smutty in the sense that there's not a lot of spicy content, but what is there is well executed. I love this book. I think I will probably try to reread this book as soon as next year, and I'm not a huge rereader. I don't reread the same books over and over and over again, but I will probably reread this one quite soon. If you're not usually a huge romance person because you feel that it's too much of that, what I was talking about with True Love Experiment, that implausible relationship dynamics, resolve things too quickly, stuff like that, this might be a good romance for you to jump into because it is very raw and real and nuanced, and the people are very real and flawed, and so you might enjoy it a bit more. At number 3, we have This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. This book is really hard to describe. It's also a bit genre bending, but it's essentially about two time traveling agents of like warring time travel factions who are both trying to adjust the timeline. So there's one faction that's trying to make changes to the timeline and another faction that's trying to prevent those changes to the timeline. And these two agents keep just missing each other throughout time and leaving each other very obscure notes, which start as like, haha, I beat you this time, and turn into, throughout the course of the book, these epic love letters. This book is not for everyone. I've recommended this book to a lot of people, and some people have really just not vibed with it. But I love this book. I cannot wait to reread this book. My dear friend Amy thankfully got me this book for my birthday so that I wouldn't have to buy it and break my ban in order to buy it, because otherwise I probably would have. It's so good. It's very literary. It's very poetic. If you don't like having to read between the lines quite heavily in a book, this is not the one for you. That's not normally my thing, but it was so well executed here. Chef's kiss. I love this book so much. But of course, I could not make this list without giving an honorable mention to my own book that came out this year, The Summer Wedding in Santorini. There's always links to it in the description. And then at number 1 and number 2, we have An Absolutely Remarkable Thing and a Beautifully Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. And I thought about trying to split these up and put them in different places in the list, but I was like, no, they are a duology and they exist together in my mind. I don't separate them in my mind. On Goodreads, these are listed as like the Carls, I think, because essentially what happens is these robot-looking alien statues come to Earth, and this one girl who's like walking home at 2 a.m. stops and like records a YouTube video about one and introduces it as Carl, and then all of a sudden all this stuff starts to happen where the Carls are becoming communicative with people and all of this weird stuff starts to unfold. They're so funny. They're so smart. They're so witty. If you've watched any of Hank Green's content, this feels like exactly the story that would come from Hank Green's mind. It is nerdy, but it is human and it is funny and it is darkly humorous at times. It is unexpected. It is innovative.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before, unafraid to reference or not reference, put it in a blender, shit on it, vomit on it, eat it, give birth to it.
I think these books have really set a standard for me in terms of what I enjoy from these sort of light science fiction stories. I read them towards the beginning of the year and I must think about them at least on a weekly basis. I think they're good fun for pretty much anyone. I struggle to think of someone I know that I wouldn't recommend these books to because, like I said, they fit into so many different genres. They're comedy, they're contemporary, they're a bit science fiction. There's even some very, very, very small romance threads in there if that's your thing, but very small. That's very much not the point of the book. There's political commentary. It's got everything. Like, these books are, I'm not going to say the perfect books. I don't believe that the perfect book is a thing that can exist, but like, if it could, I'm just saying. So there you have it. Those are my 10 favorite books of 2023. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these. Also, let me know what your favorite books of 2023 are so I can start building my 2024 TBR. Like I said, I've got a video coming up about how my year-long book buying ban has gone and what I'm going to be doing next year. So make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss that when it comes out. I hope everyone's having a happy holidays and has a very happy new year, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.